would like to check for all the ones attending our CIFP sessions today. Have you all posted on social media? Can I see a show of hands who have posted on social media? There you go, but I still see some people who have not yet posted. Please do post your moments during our activities here at CIFP 2019 by posting your photos, your moments on social media. And don't forget to mention at FPC Indo and also using the hashtag CIFP 2019. And now, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we have one last thought-provoking discussion prepared for each and every one of you. So without further ado, please join me to welcome our moderator to the stage, the founder of FPCI, Dr. Dino Pati Jalal.
Well, this is the last session of the day, and I'm very happy to see so many of you still here today. So let's give a big hand to all of us here. We have a very interesting topic for the last session, which is called Nation Building in the Post-Globalization Era. And we have two very distinguished panels who will share their thoughts with us. The first one on my right is my old friend, a maverick politician, a great businessman, and a national icon, Pak Sandiaga Uno. Second panel is also a longtime friend of mine. He is a Nobel laureate, Nobel Peace Prize winner. He is a statesman, former president and foreign minister, and he is the new client of my wife's dental clinic, right? Mr. Jose Ramos Horta. Yeah. So let me throw the first question to Jose Ramos Horta. You know, the topic is nation building in post-globalization world, 21st century. Do you think that nation building will be different in the 21st century compared to the 20th century?
Dino and the audience, forgive me. Can I launch a quiz to you all, the audience, before I answer this question? Our region comprises a number of countries that form an organization called Coral Triangle. Of these countries, I don't know if you know, Coral Triangle is extraordinarily fragile, is the food source, livelihood source for hundreds of millions of people. Which one of these countries, Coral Triangle, has the healthiest coral? Anyone can shout from the audience. 6 countries form the Coral Triangle. Indonesia is one of them. Malaysia, Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and the Timor-Leste. 6 coral triangles. Very sensitive ecosystem, marine life. Which one has the healthiest, the best preserved coral? the audience. So this is part of the brain, how you call it today? The battle of the brain. I add one more. Well, let me say, Timor-Leste has the healthiest coral system. National Geographic has been to Timor-Leste recently, and there's going to be a reportage coming out, and they are calling it the last coral kingdom. But let me also add, Conservation International says Timor-Leste has the richest biodiversity in the world. Raja Ampat has 280 species. Timor-Leste has 600 species. So please, if you like diving, Indonesians and the expatriate diplomats living here, if you like diving, just go to Timor-Leste, 2 hours away, 1 hour away. So I had to do this marketing, this publicity before, because after all day long here, I wasn't so sure whether you were terribly interested in talking about nation building. So now I answer your question. At this 21st century, we see some old conglomerations of communities, of countries splitting up. There are challenges, questions to the old nation state. Who thought that Europe would confront this? But after the Balkans in the 90s, that in the streets of Barcelona, across Catalonia, people are challenging the old nation state. And Scotland, Northern Ireland maybe, Wales maybe. Until a few years ago, we were talking about how Indonesia can keep together India or Myanmar or Nigeria. But ironically, the developing countries, the post-colonial countries, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, seem to be keeping together well. It wouldn't occur to me even, a few years ago that we would see this. Maybe I stop here for the time being.
Sandy, what are your thoughts on nation building in the 21st century?
First of all, congratulations to the young people winning the battle of the brains. Yeah, the millennials. And some of those questions, they're very honest. When Sarah asked, did you know the answer or you guessed it right? And they said, we guessed it right. So in this world, sometimes it is better to be lucky than smart. But anyway, they got the prize, so beating the team ambassadors, which has cables. I mean, Joe, you have cables every day on these issues, including Game of Thrones. Anyway, I'm more optimistic, Pak Dino. I just came back from Jember. This is the third largest city in East Java. And when you talk about nation buildings, we tend to sort of like focus more on the negatives, the pessimisms. But I see the young people. I have the latest survey that we always ran periodically, and 66% of the young people, at least from these countries, are very optimistic for the future, including the social, economic, and even political. So I'm very optimistic that nation building in the age of globalism is still very relevant. Second, I think we need to go back to the basics, go back to the most simplistic thing. And I wrote it down here that I think we need to make sure that we spend more time hearing each other's voices. We, the age of social media, we keep on, basically tweeting our thoughts, but we don't spend enough time to hear the voice. We cannot separate now the noises from the voices. But if we hear the voices, I'm very optimistic that nation buildings in the age of globalism are going to be thriving. And finally, I think much needs to be said that we need to hold hands together. There are so many challenges that we're facing, from economic point of view to ecological issues that President Jose Ramos Horta just brought up. But if we hold our hands together, I think many of these challenges could be mitigated. And I'm seeing basically the pillar for nation buildings is going to be the young generations, the millennials who are here, and they are going to be the future. And make sure that all the narratives will focus more on the positive side.
About 2 months ago, we saw, I went until today in some parts, we saw disturbances in Hong Kong, protests, and then it happened in Jakarta as well, it happened in Papua, and then in Kashmir, right? I think there was a time when all four of these were happening at the same time in our region. What is that a sign of, you think?
Some of these social, popular upheavals or protest explosions made possible, particularly in this age of social media. It would have not been possible to mobilize so many people in such a short period of time, even in countries like Chile or Europe, if it were not for the extraordinary speed of communication enabled by current 21st century technology. The sentiment, the frustration, the resentment were there, probably simmering for many, many years. And and the governments, it's happened all the time. Governments always lag behind individuals, civil society in mastering communication. Governments are often so unsophisticated, unable to communicate with the people what the government's actually doing. And many governments doing great things. That's one point I want to make. Second is, sometimes those in power, busy with governing, busy with trying to deliver, do their best, even with the best intentions, do not communicate with the people. And then the bigger the institutions are. I look at the European Union. I'm very familiar. I travel across Europe, and in 2008, 2009, I was the one who nominated, I crafted the nomination of the European Union for the Nobel Peace Prize. It won in 2010, if I'm here, 2010. But I see how institutions like the European Union, like the United Nations, disconnected from the people. You look at the elections for the European Parliament, the percentage of people who participate, very, very small. And I wonder whether ASEAN and other organizations like that are really connected with the people, or we become disconnected. And then we are surprised with frustrations that blow out, you know.
You want to add?
I think in my opinion, some of the movements, for instance, in Chile or Bolivia, I think in Chile is one recognized to be the success story in Latin America, was triggered by the increase in bus fare. If you look at Iraq and Iran recently, it was caused by the hike of the fuel. When you go to Hong Kong, the underlying issues is a whole fledged of democracy, but the one that triggers it was the income inequality, the economic injustice of young people not being able to afford an apartment. The apartment there is so expensive. And if you go back to Indonesia, it's about jobs, about corruptions, so that all have linked to the economy. I think policymakers needs, and I agree with President Jose Ramos Horta that policymakers needs to be ahead of the curve. They need to make sure they communicate well to the constituents. And the constituents are now, at least in the Indonesian case, is predominantly millennials, predominantly young people. And I think President Jokowi has done a good job in terms of making sure that he's quite up to date with millennials, but issues such as jobs, cost of livings continue to be a challenge, how not only Indonesia but the rest of the world are facing. So I think we need to continue to push government to listen to the people. I would say listen to the voice, what the people want, and now the demographic has changed. Secondly, I guess, use technology. Because if you, like I think in Papua, the social media was turned off because of a rampant hoax and a lot of fake news and misinformations. Kind of agree, but in the long run, the young people live with technology in their fingertips. We used to have a song in Indonesia when I was growing up. The song would go like, bangun tidurku terus mandi, you know. But these millennials go like, bangun tidurku terus cek HP, you know, check their mobile. Tidak lupa mengupdate status. They always waking up and trying to stay very current, very plugged in to their gadgets. So it's something, it's a plus and minus, and I think we need to be very smart in terms of making sure that government and all stakeholders, academia as well, NGOs and business in particular, look at the CEOs group here. Dennis just now was very domineering. I think business has to slow down a little bit, listen to what the people is going to say, make sure that the business community also, connected rather than disconnected to where the stakeholders are now currently moving.
Let me talk about the process of nation building. I'm referring to Singapore. Singapore was part of Malaysia, and Malaysia pushed Singapore away, and Singapore did not want to be separate from Malaysia, but sooner or later they built a national identity, right? And they built a national pride, and they pursued national development that exceeded any other country in Southeast Asia. And I think Singapore's nation building is quite strong at the present moment, Gitaria. I'm just wondering, what is the process of nation building that you experience in Timor-Leste? Yeah.
First, I'm reasonably familiar with Indonesia, as I'm familiar with many countries. And I have to say, for all the challenges Indonesia face in nation building, it's one of the most successful multicultural, multi-language, multi-religion country in the world. It's scattered over several thousand islands, huge diversity. If I'm not mistaken, you have about 300 languages. Of course, Bahasa Indonesia is spoken by almost everybody. And of these 300 languages, 200 languages are in Papua alone, which is an area of 3 times the size of UK. And in spite of all these challenges, it is one of the most successful nation building and democratic experience in the world. Of course, you have to do extra legwork, extra effort to make everybody in this archipelago feeling that yes, we are really part of this great country. Timor-Leste is much easier. We are 98% Catholic. Then we have a small minority that is Protestant. And then third is Muslim. And of course, it was the colonial history, colonial boundaries, Indonesian occupation that it reinforced this identity. We have a national language, Tetu, which is spoken by more than 80% of the people. We have Bahasa Indonesia, still very widely spoken. Now increasingly Portuguese, more than 20%. English is increasing. Timorese is generally very polyglot, learning many languages. It's not only our national language. Timorese speak Chinese, they speak Korean, they speak Tagalog, Philippine. So very open-minded, exposed to different cultures. I personally do not see diversity as a threat. One of the mistakes of many countries, one is Turkey, before that Sri Lanka, that see diversity as a threat. Diversity should be a wealth, should be richness, and it should be cherished, should be accommodated. One of the big problems of Spain in the past, Franco was trying to impose identity by crushing the Basque culture, the Basque language. One of the challenges of Turkey is this problem, unable to accommodate the Kurdish nation within Turkey. So in this regard, I go back to Indonesia's experience. It's one of the most successful. The students earlier today mentioned in the letter, that fabulous, eloquent letter they wrote, they mentioned obviously US, mentioned China, mentioned Russia, and the European Union, but failed to mention a rising world power, and that is India. I think 20 years from now, India's population will be more than China. And India has been already, for all the challenges India faced, it has had an imperfect democracy for 70 years that enable the people to voice their frustrations, their resentment, their demands. So do not discount India and as a rising power. And we will see 30 years, 50 years from now, who is the second global power? Is it China or India? Maybe United States will stay for many decades more to come. Too often in the past we dismiss this, the US is, well, no, it is still going to be the number one for too many years to come, for many years to come. Why? One thing I say, the US remains a young population. You cannot be a superpower with people on wheelchairs. Europe, very much an aged country. China, ironically, becoming an aging country, while the United States remain young. Why? Partly through immigration, through Latinos, through Asians, and it keeps having a young population. Innovative, very open, very challenging, always open to new challenge, innovation, and so on. As long as you have the highest number of patents of innovation, well, you will stay a superpower. So I stop here.
Good. I was born in Yugoslavia, and the country doesn't exist anymore. It's gone, right? And there are a few countries that actually crumbled, right? I'm just wondering, what is your take on why countries, why some countries would crumble and collapse? Yeah, like Yugoslavia did. Yeah. Do you have a take on that? Yeah.
I'll take presidents composing the answers. I was reading this book called The Revenge of Geography, whereby basically these man-made borders are actually is going to automatically crumble because they don't share the same values, share the same principles, and the nation-building foundations was not there. So I would say, to answer your questions, Pak Dino, is this happen, nations, especially nowadays, would crumble if they don't listen to the voice of the people and they don't take care of their people. They don't invest in educations enough and the basic needs of the people, and you see failed state and nation crumbles. Secondly, I think nations would be at risk to crumble if the leaders are not proactive. The leaders are sort of like stay passive in the comfort zone, just focus on what they have and not proactive in building what the country can prosper going forward. Next, I think nations is at the risk of crumbling if leaders and their people don't take risk, because the economy needs to grow. And if you want the economy to grow, you need to risk take. You need to make sure that you see opportunities, take the risk, and create policies that would enable the country to develop economically, politically, socially, ecologically, and so on and so forth. And finally, this is what you just said that, and I completely agree with you, is innovations. Leaders and stakeholders of the country needs to continue to innovate. If they don't innovate, they'll perish. They need to see, because if they continue to make the policy like the way maybe 50, 100 years ago, business as usual, you will get more and more disconnected to their constituents. And this is how nations would fail, nation would crumble, other countries will be watching and make sure that, I guess, we need to remind our leaders to make sure that they always innovate, they take risks, and they are proactive.
One message that I always try to leave in numerous speeches in my own country, because I have seen around the world the same mistakes. I always say, when we are at the top, whether you are the superpower or whether you are a strong leader in your country. And I always say, when we are at the top, we must show humility, compassion. Come down from the mountain top, from the palace. Go down to the valley. Talk to the people at the valley who are fetching water, firewood. Reach out to those at the periphery of power, of privileges. Bring them up, walk them up to the mountain. I always say, including to, and that's applicable to political leaders as to military leaders. The real great military leaders are the ones who do not humiliate those who are vanquished. Those who are vanquished in the battlefield or in the political arena. You reach out to them, embrace them, invite them to join you in rebuilding the country or rebuilding the institutions, rebuilding the economy. And sometimes I tell with sarcasm, if you are not able to be genuinely humble, at least pretend to be humble. But some people are not even able to pretend to be humble. And that's when you alienate people. Many successful leaders, they fall. Not because they perform badly economically, in economic performance, but because they are not able to show humility to the common people. And common people resent the arrogance of leaders.
But Sandy, I mean, we're all for democracies. Yeah? Indonesia is the third largest democracy in the world. But we also see in some places around the world that democracies produce bad leaders, right? Right? And because they produce bad leaders, then they lead to nationalism gone wrong, yeah? Narrow nationalism or ultra-nationalism. And as a consequence, nation building is harmed, yeah? Why do you say in some places democracies produce bad leaders? Yeah, yeah.
I believe that democracy is still the best system, and this is actually the system that supposed to select the best of leaders. But sometimes democracy is being hijacked, especially in the age of social media, informations that comes in the speed of fake news or framing certain areas. You could see that democracy may not be able to sort out all these innuendos. In particular, we see that media plays a big role in democracy, because whoever going to lead is somebody who will be most well known, and he or she, if they're covered by the media, this is one way to get there and make sure that you, be accessible to the people. And when you are elected to the office, sometimes you change, and this is something that got democracy hijacked. I don't think this is a way for us to say, let's do away with democracy. Right now, if you are watching in Indonesia, Pak Presiden, there are now a public discourse at the parliament that we would go back not to the direct local leaders and presidential elections, but basically let the council, the MPR, as well as the local council select the leaders. And I think this is a very, very wrong turn. It's a completely wrong signals that we are giving to the young generations. You're getting more and more, getting the young generation disconnected. I just read the most recent poll that the young generations have very little trust in the political systems, in particular, a political party. So I guess this is a time that we don't blame democracy, but we fix it. We fix the law, how the law that how election is being carried out to make sure that it's a level playing field. Make sure that whoever got covered with media is on an equal ground. Campaign fundraising. We need to reform the campaign fundraising because now people who have the most access to dollars or rupiah would be pretty much going to have the best chance to win in this all winner takes all democracy. So I guess what happened in this elections is quite unique. You have Pak Prabowo and Pak Jokowi, they compete. You know, I was part of the ticket. And then right after the elections, never been done before, the two sides discuss and they collaborate. So I think this is something that it's sending a very strong signals of unity, message that we're in this together, in the same boat. But however, people who are outside the government, including myself and you, Pak Dino, need to continue to make sure that democracy works through check and balances. We need to make sure that the best constructive inputs, the honest, loyal, constructive inputs are given to the people who are in power so that they continue to make sure we're making the right policies.
Jose?
Well, I want to go back to, you referred to Singapore a while ago. I often say, you know, Singapore, what it is today, economic superpower, mini superpower, it's not thanks to democracy. It was thanks to a visionary leader facing extraordinary challenges at the birth of the country, at a time when there was real communist insurgency threats in the region. There was serious ethnic challenges within the new nation, Singapore, but it is a leader, Lee Kuan Yew, who delivered to the people over decades. But we also see, you know, the Singaporean leadership is extraordinarily methodical. And in the last 10 years of elections, people were demanding more openness. And Singapore is changing gradually more open. But they have maintained this system because they deliver to the people. Now, you know, look at China. What China is today, it was not what's 50 years. I first went to China in 1976. Looking down from the only international hotel there to the streets, I saw tens of thousands of people in bicycles in winter, and all wearing the same suits, the Mao suit. You look at China then and today, obviously, I'm not going to elaborate on it, everybody knows the extraordinary economic, industrial, technological transformation of China, but also politically. You know, far more open today than it was 60 years ago, partly regardless of the political regime. The economy of the country, the industrialization, modernization of the country imposed itself. Increasingly more and more difficult for any totalitarian political system to survive in the midst of the economic social transformation. But The Chinese, because of their experience, thousands of years, generations of instability, they are doing in a bigger scale what Lee Kuan Yew did in tiny Singapore. Deng Xiaoping and the leaders after him have delivered to the people, are delivering to the people. But gradually, they have to deliver more in political freedoms. How they will continue to balance between this extraordinary transformation, social, economic, and political freedom. I think you look at Singapore, a miniature, how they're doing it, and China in a much, much bigger scale. It's fascinating. But each of them are developing their own strategy, how to handle this situation.
You try to get into the public service, but I don't see many young people going in droves to public service. They're very suspicious of going into public service. I'm just wondering why you think that is, and what would you say to young people here who are interested in a career in public service or doing something in politics? Yeah.
I don't think we are short of talents of young people willing to go and wanting to go to the public service. It's basically I've just done a survey. More than 50% actually of the young people wants to be entrepreneurs. And because the image of public service that is very inflexible, very, I would say, old school, not that innovative. Public service is being associated by rigidity, and you wear uniforms. I mean, young people now, they don't wear uniforms. Look at you. You're an ambassador, but you're wearing sneakers.
Nikes.
Nikes. Hopefully you change to my brand after this show. I'll send you. What's your size? The shoe size?
9.5.
9.5. Okay. I'll give you mine. Mine is also 9.5. So these are simple things that young people would need to be convinced that they would be able to continue to embrace the diversity, the flexibility. They like to work from home. They like gig economy. They like 2 or 3 jobs a day. In the morning, they may work for one e-commerce company. In the afternoon, they may be doing consulting, and at night they may be doing DJs, or they may be a chef because of their hobby. So, but I guess public service is also is very interesting for people who wants to make changes. And the best way, and this is how I got convinced into politics, into public service, is that your impact to be, if you focus on your entrepreneurial activities or your own NGOs, probably limited to hundreds, maybe thousand, but if you're in public office, your impact would be millions of the people who would be feeling the changes and the impact that you're introducing. So I guess it's one way that we in public service needs to communicate also to the young people that in order for you to make sure that the country continue to be prosper, the best of talents from the young generations also must come to public office.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of our session, and I was wondering if you want to say something about to the young people who want to get into public service before we close here.
My message to the young people is we often hear political, academic cliches saying things like the future belongs to the young people. Obviously, today you are 20, tomorrow you'll be 21, 30. but belong only to those who study, study, and study, equipping yourself with knowledge. That's why Israel survived, and that's why Singapore survived, and that's why China is beating the US in 5G technology. China is investing hugely on artificial intelligence, billions of dollars. So you may protest, but also study, study and study. That's what I always tell our young people. Not to be just good, not to be average, but to be the best. But to be the best, not to be vain, to be selfish, to be the pride of your parents, to be the pride of your community, to serve the country, to serve humanity. Yes, the future in your hands, obviously, the future in your hands but as of today, you prepare the future. You prepare by studying. Less demonstrations, focus on the study. Because I did a lot of demonstration and not too much studies myself. So I would tell the young people, study, study, and study. If everyone is the best, your country will be the best.
Pa Sandy, I don't think we can end this without me asking you, what are your plans in the next 5 years? Yeah.
I'm now jobless. As you know, I left my business. I retired from my business. And when I joined politics, I don't want to mix politics and business. So I've left the city hall, and I already announced that I will not go back to the city hall to take my old job back, because I want to make sure that politicians could be pretty much viewed by the young generations to be somebody who's holding their word. I said I was running for vice president, not for just a try-ins, but I want to make sure that I'm sending a clear message to the young people that I'm going to do it in a totality. So I've been blessed. I've been really, really blessed by this country. This country has been very, very generous to me. I started my business from zero, and now this is where I am. A company that I founded is doing well in their investments.
How much money you got now? I'm just kidding.
I think I would already giving the service to this country and make sure that our country and the rest of our neighbors would benefit because we, again, making sure that Indonesia is a successful story of nation building in the age of globalism.
When is your next marathon?
This year I didn't do marathon, I only did half marathon, but I'm thinking about doing full Ironman next year. So that's...
Explain what Ironman is.
Ironman is doing swimming for 3.8 kilometers, and then continue by bicycling for 180 kilometers. And then after that, running a full marathon of 42 kilometers, all in one event.
That's crazy. Really?
But
yeah.
I would like to also inspire the young generations that Pak Dino also completed the New York City Marathon in 2011.
Yes, yeah, I did.
So he's one of the very few ambassadors of Indonesia who have completed a marathon, and I was really impressed that you could run and finish, and you did it with very little training. So it should inspire the young generation also to pick up sports.
Yeah, I mean, before I close, I will never forget that day. We went to the G20 summit in Cannes, I think. And then I told my president, I got to go back, I got to run a marathon. And I didn't train at all. So I went on the plane. The moment I landed, I ran for 42 kilometers. And it was the most painful experience I've ever had in my life. You know, when you didn't train for a marathon, then your body just gives up on you. But I finished here, so. Yeah.
That's the last message to young generations. Train, train, train. And make sure that when the opportunity comes, you'll be able to achieve your success. Good luck, young generations.
Good. Let's give a big hand to Pa Santiago Uno and to Jose Ramos Horta. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attendance and your kind attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And please, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy our band, Fiertal. And see you again at CIFP next year.
Like the legends of the Phoenix, all with beginnings. What keeps the planet spinning? The force from beginning. Yeah. We've come too far to give up who we are. So let rest our bars and our call to the stars. See up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to the sun. We up all night to the fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We up all night to the sun. We up all night to get some. We up all night to get some. We up all night to get lucky. The present has no ribbons. Your gifts keep on giving. Oh, what is this the feeling? Oh, if you wanna live, I will live. Yeah, yeah. We've come too far to give up who we are. So let rest the bar and I call to the stars. She up on up to get some. She up on up to get some. She up on up for the fun. I'm up on up to get lucky. We up on up to the sun. We up on up to get some. We up on up for the fun. We up on up to get lucky. We up on up to